Hello, and thanks so much for joining us today. I'm here to touch on an exciting and somewhat scary topic for many of you, and that's figuring out how to connect with Gen Z job seekers. Over the last decade or so, millennials have dominated the conversation when it comes to the younger workforce, but as millennials age into management roles and establish their careers, the next generation we have to start focusing on is Gen Z. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. A little bit about me before we get started. My name is Kristen Schantz. I'm the VP of Growth Marketing here at Hierology. I had the joy of working here for almost 6 years now. And what keeps me up at night, or what I spend all my days focusing on, is understanding the labor market and how Hierology can better help different people like you. I also get the joy of working with our partner here, Netconnect, on these things. And I also am an elder millennial who gets to manage Generation Z. So I have definitely some perspectives that I'm excited to share with you today. I wanted to start it out by touching on the state of the current labor market. While it may seem like demand for talent is slowing down in some markets, think tech, traditional office workers, et cetera, it's what dominates the headlines. In what we traditionally call blue collar, or what I like to say skilled labor or hourly workers, there's still a huge shortage of talent and a very high demand to fill those roles. According to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, healthcare, professional business services, hospitality, food services all have the highest number of job openings today. This is largely because most of these types of businesses had to let go of the most of their staff at the onset of the pandemic. And then when it became to refill those roles, most workers who may have taken these jobs pre-2020 move on to other types of work. One opportunity that I see for employers in these sectors to win despite the odds is focusing on the younger generation in the workforce today, also known as Gen Z. Workers in this age group have vastly different life experiences and thus expectations when it comes to work than older generations, even millennials. And understanding this group can give us a glimpse into what we want to do to redefine our jobs and our processes in order to attract more talent, fill open roles, and drive business outcomes. So let's talk about it. Why is Gen Z so important to understand? Well, they're entering the workforce in record numbers, replacing baby boomers who are retiring in droves. And in fact, in the next several years, these folks are expected to make up more than a quarter of the workforce. There's a real opportunity for employers looking to fill their open roles with workers from this age group who are going to stick around longer term and make a big impact. So who is Gen Z? Anyone born between 1997 and 2012. So in other words, anyone around 26 and under. While it's easy to want to compare this group to millennials, they're wildly different. Millennials are deep in their careers and are much more adjusted to the processes and status quo set by their older counterparts. Millennials also remember a time before the internet, and they were experiencing the workforce before the pandemic hit. Said differently, about 50% of the millennials have actually experienced not one, but two recessions now because of the pandemic. They lived through 2008, 2009, coming out of college, and are now in this market. Gen Z, not so much. So to put some more context and color to this generation, the oldest members of Gen Z were born when AOL Instant Messenger launched, meaning they've lived their whole life with instant online communication. They were 1 when Google was founded. They were 10 when the first iPhone was released, so they never lived any of their teen or adult years without a smartphone. And they were 12 when Uber founded. So Uber was around for 4 years before any of them even got a driver's license. And the gig economy in general, which includes Uber, was very well established and common by the time they graduated college. Additionally, this group of folks have never used phone books. Many have never made phone calls to make doctor's appointments or schedule a dinner reservation. They're a generation that has come up of age only knowing the mobile, digital, and highly connected world. To them, anything and everything can and should be done online, and not only that, but also from a mobile device. And remember, these stats are only just the oldest members of this generation. Younger folks from this age group don't even remember a time before any of these massive technological advancements that largely define how we live and work today. Of course, it's worth mentioning that none of this is negative by any means. The point is that this group is digitally native, and that is what makes them unique from any other groups in the workforce today. Another defining characteristic of this generation is more and more of these folks are choosing to make a living off of gig or freelance work. And this is made possible by the rise of Uber-like businesses models across the industries. Auto technicians or housekeepers or bartenders can even pick up contract work via different third-party services and completely make their own schedules and have more control over their lives. This is having an impact on your ability to hire. There are just fewer people in the workforce because people can make their own money for themselves. And it also offers a clue into what people really want out of work. Whether that's more autonomy, more flexibility, more freedom to decide what they want to do and when. And even more importantly, what I'm hearing more and more is this concept of daily pay, being able to work for a living wage on a daily basis. Like I mentioned, data suggests that this trend is largely led by Gen Z. In fact, half of Gen Z folks in the workforce participated in freelance work on some level in 2020. I think, of course, part of this stems from the pandemic, which, as I mentioned, has shaped this generation's perception of work forever. But there's also this idea a younger generation is just inherently more entrepreneurial. They're less likely to be interested in being tied to a company rigid scheduling, and instead they want to carve out their own path. And additionally to being digital native and having this entrepreneurial drive to work on their own terms, Gen Z is also defined by a number of other factors. One of the most significant being that the vast majority of this group have never held a job in a pre-pandemic setting. The oldest Gen Z graduated college in 2008, 2018, so some may have had a few pre-March 2020 years under their belt, but most did not. To them, everything that we have had to do to adjust to the pandemic 3 years ago, remote work, limited in-person connection, lack of flexibility, largely online sales processes is the norm for them. And of course, this leads into their expectations of potential employers. Some additional points to mention, largely because they grew up in the era of social media, they are disproportionately affected by stress and anxiety. And of course, this is a ripple effects in the workplace. They're less loyal and change jobs more often than their older counterparts. Gone are the days of starting someplace and retiring from that place 30 years later. They're more racially diverse. In fact, 1 in 4 Gen Zers is Hispanic compared to just 4% of boomers and 12% of Gen X in the United States. Thus, they, rightfully so, have higher standards for diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts from their employer. And they've been named the first real global generation, which means they're the first generation that really can access any information and connect with folks from anywhere in the world with the click of a button. This influences expectations for work, as well as because they have broader horizons and have access to so many different perspectives that they don't feel connected to the status quo set by their parents and their parents' parents and beyond. Okay, so we know this generation is digitally savvy, they're entrepreneurial in nature, and they're very strongly interested in making work for them on their terms. On this surface, this seems like a difficult generation to convince to come join your payroll, but the good news is there are things you can do to adjust your jobs, processes, and so forth to make your company more attractive to this group of people. So let's dig in. The key to attracting job seekers of any generation is retailing your jobs much like you would products. In other words, you need to sell your organization and your job to job seekers as if you were selling a consumer or a product. You need to sell what makes you better than competitors down the street and better for working for themselves. So think about the definition of a product. Your job is really no different. It's something that you build and refine that meets a certain need for a specific group of buyers. Let's look at an iPhone, for example. Obviously, they need being met is a mode of communication, but all makes and models offer some sort of differentiation, whether that be better camera, 5G, longer battery life, more storage, new and better features and functionality. And in the case of Apple, and another differentiating factor is simply the brand name. Whatever it is, whether it's an iPhone, clothing, shoes, vehicles, brands need to find a way to stand out and sell their products as an option that is better for buyers than the competitor down the street. So when it comes to jobs, you have to start with the buyer need. Of course, the buyer for today's discussion is the Gen Z job seeker. The very basic need for a job is work in exchange for a paycheck. So you need to offer pay that is consistent with the market. But there's also so many other factors people look in for jobs these days. Most do not make decisions about work solely based on pay anymore. There's so much other more nuance than that and have a wide range of benefits they look for in work beyond pay. As we discussed, Gen Zs are pretty different than that of the older generations. When we asked respondents in our 2023 applicant study that just released a couple months ago, what would motivate them to take a lower paying job over a higher paying offer? Unsurprisingly, Gen Z responds were more likely than their older counterparts to list flexibility. Given that many Gen Zers have never worked in a pre-pandemic setting, it should go without saying that they have higher expectations for flexibility than Gen X or baby boomers. 50% of this generation would take a lower paying job for greater flexibility compared to only 45% of Gen X and 42% of baby boomers. Career growth. This generation is also more likely than Gen X and baby boomers to make a lower paying job in exchange for that. And another example of standouts as here point to culture and mental health support. This generation is more likely than any other to take a lower paying job for mental health and support and just a culture that they see themselves a part of it. So let's take a look at this. Let's start with the concept of flexibility, because too often employers believe flexibility means remote work and that people just don't want to work in person anymore. And it's easy for the employer that can't offer remote work to then just brush this off. But take a look at some of these quotes from the Gen Z respondents in our survey. People have a much broader definition of flexibility than one might think. For the most part, people aren't asking to just work from home. That's not what flexibility means to them. Although many people do want that option, and something you should offer if you can. There's no reason a call center or someone who works a desk in at a hotel or things like that. Some of that work can be done at home, but it's more so that people want to be able to work around their lives, stop separating work and life, and be able to live more of a blended lifestyle where work and life coexist. So when it comes down to it, people don't want this concept of work-life balance that dominated the early 2000s. They don't want to have to separate themselves and work in their everyday lives. It's just life with work blended into who people are. And of course, Gen Z is really leading the way with this. And the impacts of this on your business are astronomical. I put this quote here from Mark Cuban. Hopefully everyone knows who he is. You can hear that from someone else other than me. In a recent interview, Cuban explained how he feels Gen Z is the greatest generation because they are the forefront of change when it comes to work as we know it. And they're forcing employers, us, to make real and lasting changes that will impact generations to come for the better. So if you're not already thinking about how you look at work-life balance and flexibility, however that works for your business, it's going to be detrimental not only to your ability to hire as Gen Z continues to make their mark on the workplace, but also your ability to serve customers, because this age group is going to become your customers too. If they're 25% of the workforce, they're 25% of your buying population. They're going to look at businesses holistically and not only work for you, but also buy from the businesses that meet them where they are. So let's take a culture next. This is a tough one because culture can mean so many different things to so many different people, and it can really be difficult to just create a certain culture within your organization. Building culture takes time, and it's something you can't necessarily dictate on your own. Here's some quotes from our Gen Z respondents on what culture means to them. You'll see a lot of talk about respect, communication, transparency, trust, and support. So what do all these points, trust, communication, respect, come down to? Your company values. It's critical that you define what you want your culture to look like in your values, and then everything you do needs to tie back to them. So anyone you hire, how you train managers, how you define policies is all guided by those. This is the best way you can then trickle down behaviors of trust, respect, etc., from the top down. I can give an example of my time at Hierology. One of our core values is no assholes. And we bring this into almost everything we do. It gets a chuckle from everyone. So I hope it did from you. From how we score interviews with any candidates, to giving performance reviews, to enacting any kind of policy with an office or a company ads, we hire people who aren't assholes, and we make sure that everything behaves in the way that we do once they're integrated into the workplace and interacting with one another and with our customers. And then this is a direct impact on our culture. It results in respect, trust, impact, and all of the factors that play into a great company culture. We actually have a weekly huddle as a company, and every Tuesday of our 5 core values, we give awards relative to that. Who's exemplifying that? Who can we honor with those things? And at the end of the year, there's rewards related to this. And I highly recommend you look at our website and take a look at our About Us page to see how we represent those throughout everything that we do. Given what we know about the racial makeup of Gen Z, as well as the standards for a better DEI, policies that increase diversity, promote equity, and challenge exclusionary behavior are critical. Not only does a DEI policy help you attract younger workers and help you deliver better business outcomes, but it's also just the right thing to do to contribute to a more just society. So take time to redefine your hiring process. Think about where you source candidates and your team's implicit biases. Identify equity gaps amongst different groups internally and how you can close those gaps. And then facilitate processes that allow you to gather diverse perspectives and challenge exclusionary behavior. Be sure to document what you're doing in a standard DEI statement. And most importantly, be sure to stick to your word. Nothing will frustrate this generation more than empty promises, especially for something as critical as this. And finally, I want to touch on mental health support. While there is, of course, still a stigma around mental health, it is starting to reduce quite a bit in the recent years, and that's largely thanks to Gen Z. This generation has been more in tune with their mental health and more vocal about it than any other generation before them, which again, I think is largely because their mental health has been affected by technology in ways that a lot of us haven't experienced it with older generations. So as an employer, you have to meet them where they are with this. This means building mental health support into your policies, from your insurance coverage to your management training. Managers aware of how to address and handle mental health concerns, or how to behave in a way that does not negatively impact someone's mental health. And into your PTO time example. For example, we have a mental health day that we give everyone off once a month. A partner of ours in the job board world has what they call U Day on a quarterly basis, where everyone at the company takes it off, and it's all in support of driving mental health and self-care. So now that we've designed jobs that meet the needs of Gen Z job seekers, we now need to understand how to better connect with Gen Zers in the job market. So let's go back to the survey that I've talked about. Take a look at the differences between Gen Z and the rest of the generations here. The biggest standouts for us is that Gen Zers are more likely than anyone else to have found their most recent job via a simple Google search. Again, this group is digitally native. They were 1 year old when Google was founded. They don't know a world without it. So they're most likely to do that also through a friend. They are a group that is based on social media. So it is high time and not surprising that they use Google to shop for the product, aka a job, or they go to their friends. And on the Google search front, this means you really have to have a strong SEO in place to ensure that you're showing up in these searches. Like I mentioned, Gen Z is accustomed to getting all the information they need on their phones with a single click. They're less likely to scroll or click through to read more. They feel like what they haven't seen isn't what they want. So it's important to do what you can to show up in these first few slots with the right information. And of course, the right approach here is going to differ for everyone. But my advice, take it for what it is to go back to what we discussed before. Include information in the copy that you know Gen Z wants to see, like culture, flexibility, career pathing, their ability to see themselves in your position so that you show up when they're searching in these terms. On the referrals front, we asked how follow-up question in the survey about whether or not they are more likely to take a job if a trusted friend vouches for the company. And Gen Z was also the most likely to strongly agree that they would in fact be more likely to do so. I think part of this trend we're seeing is that the generation is a little bit more skeptical about things they need to read or see on the internet, especially from brands or employers. They want to hear from a neutral source that something, whether it be a product or a job, is worth their time. They're more skeptical of messaging coming directly from an employer than, say, a trusted friend or acquaintance. This is the influencer generation, so of course they're going to go to the people that can influence their decisions about jobs. This also ties into the point I mentioned above, that this group being more likely to change jobs. Gen Z is much more likely to be open to exploring new opportunities if presented to them. So while this may not be actively shopping around for work, they may pay attention in your roles and be open to making a move if a trusted friend brings your company to their attention. And then when it comes to completing the actual application, Gen Zers want it to be easy, mobile friendly, and transparent. They're more likely than older groups to choose not only to a job if it requires a cover letter, and they're more likely to give up if it's too hard to be on a smartphone. Think too many fields, small screen, required attachments, etc. And they're more likely to skip job openings they're interested in altogether if the actual benefits they're looking for are not listed on the job description. Let's take a look at mobile. And of course, the best way to make your applications more friendly is to optimize them applications for mobile. Remember, this group of people is accustomed to getting anything they want online quickly. Most have never used a phone book. They don't own printers or scanners. They don't remember a time before scheduling doctor's appointments online. Or for many, even ordering meals online. It's a Postmates generation. To them, easily doing almost anything online on a mobile phone is the norm. Take a minute and try to apply to your own jobs on your phone. Just do it. Is your job easy to find? Can you easily fill out the fields? Are you scrolling a lot? Is it asking for a PDF upload of a resume? Something that you don't have on your phone? Are there lots of drop downs? Is it slow to load? These kinds of barriers will turn Gen Z applicants away, especially in a time when opportunities for work are essentially endless. Take a look at your comparison between the two on the screen here. The one on the left has large fields and the entire application can be seen on one screen without having to scroll. The one on the right requires a ton of scrolling to get through it, as lots of small fields that are difficult to complete, and the drop downs take up the whole screen, making navigation really tough. It's also asking for a lot of information, like previous work history, education history, info that is difficult to complete on the go. Do you know your former supervisor's phone number off the top of your head? I sure don't. Even if the fields aren't all required, it's just daunting to look at, and it can really deter people from participating. And this applies more than just Gen Z. Think about your own personal experience. And so if you solve for this generation, you will solve for other generations. And finally, you've designed your jobs for Gen Z and you found ways to better connect with them in the market. Now I want you to touch on how do you convert these applicants into candidates. So let's go back to the survey. One takeaway that we found really interesting is that Gen Z was more likely than any other to ghost employers. Millennials actually took the top spot on this question, unfortunately. Now, I know you all have experienced this in the last few years, but just a reminder that this term refers to candidates simply dropping out of the process without warning or explanation. So when we followed up with why and why do they ghost, aside from receiving another job offer, the top two answers were lack of communication from the company, which seems crazy to me. The process was taking too long. And once they found out more about the job, they were no longer interested. All of these issues can be addressed with a few tweaks to your recruiting and hiring process, which I'll touch on in the next few slides. The first being writing better job descriptions. This is how you're going to address the issue of Gen Z job seekers feeling frustrated because later on they realize the job they've applied to doesn't meet their needs. This goes back to my analogy earlier. You need to sell your jobs like products. You would never promote a product with a very basic and bland description like gets the job done, works okay. So why would you do the same for your jobs? So look at the description. Put yourself in the shoes of the job seeker. Would you apply to this job? Performing light service work, not very compelling, right? No added info about benefits or what it's like to work for this particular business, is not doing anything at all to sell the product or convey to the job seeker, in this case, the Gen Zer, that the company might actually be able to meet their needs in terms of things like culture, flexibility, and future growth. And take a look at this one. It lists benefits that might be enticing to a job seeker. It shows pay range. It gives a company overview and a history that hints at the culture. In general, it sells the role more like a business would sell a product, focusing on what's in it for the buyer. And again, remember that Gen Z is skeptical of all things they can't easily research and confirm online. So if your job descriptions are sparse and not at all compelling, Gen Z is going to look elsewhere. You need to give them the information they're looking for right away. Another way to keep the process moving faster and engage more with Gen Z candidates is by texting them throughout the process. The majority of Gen Z respondents agree that responding to texts is easier than responding to email and that they typically check their text before email. And we know that Gen Z is digitally native. Most of them don't remember a time before cell phones. This is really a normal and expected way of communication for them. Don't let your messages to schedule interviews or move great candidates along in the process get lost in cluttered inboxes. Send a text to get right to the candidate, to keep them things moving faster and keep them engaged. We all text all day. I know I do. Why would we not text candidates? So let's put this into practice. Let's take Jack, 25-year-old skilled technician looking for a job in an auto dealership. Bad. Finds her job on Indeed, but it doesn't include any of the key benefits that you offer. He applies anyways, but it's tough to do on his phone. He has to fill out multiple repetitive fields, takes him over an hour. There are better options than that in Indeed, by the way. Somehow it makes through and submits his application anyways. He doesn't hear back from you for 5 days. 5. Interviewers are not prepared. He has to come in multiple times for different things. Everything you schedule with him is done via email, so it takes multiple days to just get something on the calendar. Whole process takes a month, and by then he's gotten 2 other offers. Good. Let me walk you through this process in a different way. Finds your job on Indeed, but the job description leads with the benefits. It leads with a career path. It leads with everything we talked about. He applies and is excited about it, but he's able to do it on his phone. He puts in his name. He's able to do it. He uses Indeed Applied. It's super simple. He makes it through and submits his application to the company. He hears back from someone immediately within an hour. We're excited to talk to you, Jack. We know that you're potentially a good fit. Here's a pre-screen survey to help make sure that you're a fit for our business. Let's talk about it. Right after he fills out the pre-screen survey, he gets a text saying, hey, let's schedule your interview. He can do it online. He doesn't have to email back and forth with anyone. He doesn't have to talk to anyone. It's ready. He shows up to some virtual interviews and he's able to go through a consistent process. He's asked similar questions. People know who he is. They've read his background. They understand when he applied, how he applied, what his experience is, and even have his survey filled out. He has one final interview where someone greets him, knows him, takes him through the dealership, is ready for him, and talks him through the whole onboarding process and candidate experience. The whole process takes less than 2 weeks. He accepts the offer and he's ready to go. Which process would you rather go through as an individual candidate yourself? And so that's what you need to think about. You need to put yourself in those shoes. And so that's all I have for you today. To summarize here, by the end of 2022, Gen Z is predicted to, by the end of this year, is predicted to make up 27% of the workforce. These workers have substantially different life and work experiences than all the other generation, which isn't a bad thing. It's just different and unique. So we need to change our approach. Recruiting and hiring them requires you then to redesign your jobs and make sure you're fulfilling your promises here. If you're promising flexibility and fulfilling work, you better deliver. This is what's going to help keep turnover low. Remember, Gen Z is going to change jobs the most often and will fuel your referral programs. Happy employees refer their friends. And you connect with Gen Z on their own terms. Meet them on the channels and devices they prefer. Give them the processes they want, make it fast and easy, adhere to what they expect, because if you don't, someone else will. And finally, create a faster and more engaging hiring process. And of course, this is made easier with seamless systems that talk to each other, as opposed to relying on clunky tools built around your processes rather than built around the needs of the candidate. And with that, I'll thank you so much. And thank you to our friends at Netconnect. Have a great day.